Legal cases, legal issues, legal matters. You're watching WFTV's Law Talk with anchor Christopher Heath and expert legal analyst, attorney Mark NeJame.
All right, let's talk about some of the current cases, issues, and legal matters that our viewers are talking about. Joining me today is our legal analyst, Mark NeJame of the NeJame Law Firm.
Hey, Chris.
Of course, Albert Yanfa, who is in the personal injury division there, partner over at NeJame. Right. Today we're talking about bullying. And like when we grew up, bullying was very much, it was face-to-face. Bullying has changed fundamentally in the cyber age and in the last 10, 15 years because it's no longer face-to-face. It's online.
It's true, and by the way, I grew up before you did. So the fact is that it continues to evolve, and there's remedies now, and with the internet and the cyberbullying that takes place there, it's not only face-to-face and mocking somebody at school or outside of school, but it now takes on a life of its own. As we all know, the power of the internet. And these kids can follow each other. They know where each other are by certain social media platforms. And it's gotten to the place where kids are hurting themselves, and worse, they're killing themselves. And there's a globbing on of other students and other kids that are just really causing tremendous emotional harm, not just the old-time physical harm that you referenced. And so now the law is catching up to it. And as we talked about before we went on the air, the law is always behind social change. It takes the law a while to catch up what's happening in society. And here we have criminal penalties for for bullying, and we have civil penalties where people can get sued and institutions can get sued.
And Albert, that brings up a point because the law has not always had, at least codified in the statutes, some of these things. And so there is kind of a delay, and that both presents a problem both on the legal side, but also people need to be aware that the law has finally started to recognize that these things are out there, correct?
The law has recognized cyberbullying now, and it's important for families to recognize it as well. A lot of times it's not like it used to be where your child would come home with a black eye or something like that. Some of the warning signs are depression, lowering of grades, inability to eat. There's a lot of things that we need to look out for. And it's now incumbent on the schools, now that we've codified it, now that the law has identified that this is a real thing, the schools have a responsibility to these things too. And what the schools are required to sort of look at it, there's a shortcut called RIP, R-I-P. So what a school might need to look for is repeated action against a particular student, an intent to cause harm. And the P one's interesting. It's an imbalance of power. So, let's just say you and I are classmates and we just go at each other and we pick on each other and we can be as mean as we want to each other. But if we are seen as social peers, that's not necessarily bullying, right? That just might be a conflict between two students. But if one student is physically more strong than the other, larger, older, different grades, or if there's a pack mentality where a group of students are going after one particular student, then you have an imbalance of power, and that tips the scale against bullying. And that's when the law says, schools, you need to be able to identify these types of things.
And it's really that pack mentality that becomes so dangerous because the kids get together in friend groups or online and form groups, and then they start attacking. And I think the statistics are something like 31% of kids have been bullied in one way or another. And kids are often very hesitant to report it because they feel, and they're right in many instances, that it will only exacerbate the situation and more kids will come down on them, and they kind of put up with it. So I think it's really important for parents to look at the warning signs: depression, withdrawing, not eating, sadness.
And that really dovetails into the fact that the other side of this is not just the legal side. I know that's what we're talking about here, but we're dealing with real-world consequences. And you brought this up earlier. You can have kids harm themselves, physically harm themselves because of the bullying, and they can't escape it. And that's something where, all of us as parents need to look at it. But then, too, also school administrators, people in positions where they're watching this, need to be aware of these signs and be aware that there are things within the law that both give them tools to help stop the bullying and protection if they try and intervene.
As well said, Chris. And we've seen it where a lot of schools are taking a bit of although many of the schools and the administrators and they have on-campus security, but they still don't get it. and they're waiting too long, or they're wanting to make it so that there's not controversy within the school. And that puts liability on them, which is really a secondary issue, because if you lose a child to suicide, or the child is damaged for the rest of their lives, no amount of compensation is really going to take care of that. But the fact is that they need to be upfront. They need to have real life punishments, more than a slap on the wrist to these kids who are bullying, because that's how some of them feel power. When I was younger, I used to confuse self-esteem and ego. Ego, I thought, was the same as self-esteem, and they're not. They're inversely proportional to each other. And a lot of these kids who are bullying, who really have a very low sense of self-esteem, and they're picking on other kids in an attempt to elevate themselves. And if the school doesn't get involved in this and have real-life punishments, a suspension and even expulsion for those kids who are bullying others, then they're perpetuating the situation, and it could lead to more liability for them for not addressing the issue as they should.
And Albert, yeah, and the law is catching up on this.
The law is catching up, thankfully, and Mark brought up a very, very good point. We don't really talk about the person who's perpetuating the bullying. What the statistics show is victims of bullying are twice as likely to commit suicide. These kids it's just tragic. But also those who perpetuate the bullying are twice as likely to commit suicide as well, because they have problems at home and they don't know what to do with that as well. So the law protects people who are basically whistleblowers, who say, I think this child is being bullied. And if you're wrong, you can't be sued for at least making a good faith effort to protect a child, be it a student, a teacher, a volunteer, or a parent.
If we can just end it,
yeah.
Report the bullying.
Yeah.
No matter, the consequences are worse to let it perpetuate rather than reporting it and attempting to end it.
Yeah, no, we talk the law on this thing, but we're all parents. We all want our kids to grow up happy and healthy and in a safe environment, and this is very, very critical. Albert, thank you, as always.
Thanks,
Mark,
Chris.
thank you. All right, so if you'd like to see more of these law talks or any of our other ones, visit our website at wftv.com/legal or join us each week right here on Facebook. I'm Christopher Heath, and thanks for watching.
WFTV's Law Talk was brought courtesy of the Personal Injury and Accident Division of NeJame Law.